Well, we have been wondering what President Obama is going to do on the Keystone Pipeline. Perhaps the recent oil spills in Minnesota and Arkansas, relevant to the pipeline, will cause him to rethink whether or not authorizing that is a good idea. Jerry Karnas with the Center for Biological Diversity, there we go, will join us for that conversation. Prior to that, Mark Potok with the Southern Poverty Law Center will join us to talk about the rise in anti-American government patriot groups. But first, Adam Mason with Iowa CCI joins us to talk about the latest developments in the hog confinement battle.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Ed Fallon here, folks. Gateway Market and Cafe is your locally owned source for specialty groceries. Enjoy chef-crafted, prepared foods, artisan baked goods, organic produce, specialty cheeses, and hand-selected wines and craft beer. Visit the lively cafe for breakfast, lunch, or dinner 7 days a week. Gateway Market is centrally located on the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway and Woodland Ave. Stop by or visit www.gatewaymarket.com for more details. That's Gateway Market, folks. Good food, great community.
This moment of silence brought to you by Tally's Restaurant Bar and Catering, home of Des Moines' premier rooftop dining experience. Located in the heart of Beaverdale, Tally's offers speedy and affordable rooftop lunch, catering for events both large and small, innovative cuisine, as well as vegetarian and gluten-free menus. Come to Tally's for live music, dry-aged steaks, Sunday brunch, and all-you-can-eat ribs every Monday night. Tally's Restaurant Bar and Catering at 2712 Beaver Avenue. Call 279-2067. That's 279-2067.
Times are tough, and most people are just trying to make their cars last a little bit longer. That's why you should know about Sargent's Garage in Des Moines. You can trust Sargent's to make the right diagnosis and give you a fair price. Whether it's a routine oil change or a major repair, Sargent's always does outstanding work. So don't give up on that old car just yet. Call Sargent's Garage at 246-8149. That's 246-8149 for Sargent's Garage.
Hello, Mid-American Energy.
I'm very concerned that you want to bill me an extra $5,000 to build a nuclear reactor. Do you know we're in the middle of a recession?
Oh, we were hoping you wouldn't hear about that until after the legislature had taken action.
Why not let your shareholders pick up the tab?
Oh, way too risky for our shareholders. We need you, our loyal customers, to pay for it.
Wait, let me see if I understand this. Mid-American wants to build a nuclear power plant in 10 or 20 years, and they want me to pay for it now?
That's right.
Well, I'll just take my business elsewhere.
Sorry, we're a monopoly. What we say goes.
I've heard nuclear power is more expensive than other sources.
Yes it is.
And I've heard there's no plan for how to dispose of nuclear waste.
We're looking at shooting it into the sun.
Well, I'm not going to sit back and let you make bad decisions with my money.
We're betting you will.
Stop Mid-American's power grab. Call your legislators today. 281-3371. 281-3371.
Paid for by Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Nestled in the heart of downtown, Ritual Cafe is one of Des Moines' most unique places, offering a wide variety of coffee and tea. Ritual Cafe also serves the only all-vegetarian menu in town. And Ritual Cafe is a cultural hub for artists and musicians, with a performance stage hosting local, national, and international talent. Make Ritual Cafe a part of your daily ritual. On 13th Street between Locust and Grand in downtown Des Moines. And check out ritualcafe.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hi, folks. Welcome to the Fallon Forum. We're going to be talking later in the program about the oil spill in Arkansas and what that might mean for the Keystone Pipeline. It may give Obama a chance to rethink whether or not approving that pipeline is a good idea. We've got a gentleman with the Center on Biological Diversity, Jerry Karnas, joining us for that conversation. Prior to that, Mark Potok with the Southern Poverty Law Center is going to join us. He recently wrote a piece talking about the rise of anti-American government so-called patriot groups. We're going to talk with him about that. But first, in the studio with me is Adam Mason with Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ed. Thank you.
And we're going to talk about hogs. We always talk about hogs with you.
That's right.
You're kind of my go-to hog guy. Yeah, and so again, there is the legislature is rapidly winding down, but there's still debate on this issue. What's going on?
That's right. Well, you nailed it, Ed. There's a couple big ticket items that are going to be on the bargaining table all the way through the end of the legislative session. But what I'm here to talk about is a bad factory farm deregulation bill. The pork producers, aided by the Farm Bureau, of course, set out this legislative session to basically deregulate how they mothball, is what they're calling it, mothball factory farm buildings.
The old ones that kind of break down, they aren't able to be used anymore. And I want to say, when I was in the State House, I remember discussion about the shelf life of a confinement being about 15 years?
That's exactly right.
And that's panning out to be true.
Right. And, we basically opened the door for corporate CAFOs back in 95. And so since then, we've seen huge expansion amongst that industry, but we're really hitting that window now where factory farms need to go offline or need to face huge repairs. So the industry wants to take some of these offline without completely destroying them or having to pay for the cost of upgrading them. And we're also seeing this combined with the effects of legislation that we won a couple years ago, banning the application of liquid manure from factory farms onto snow-covered ground. So basically, this what we're seeing now, House File 512 and Senate File 418, appropriately named the Mothball Bill.
I never thought I'd hear of a bill relevant to hog confinements named after a moth.
That's right. So this Mothball Bill, basically what it would do is allow factory farmers to store excess manure in these closed down buildings, or to change the way that they count how many hogs they have on any one site, so that they don't have to have a manure management plan. Again, creating a loophole for how they store factory farm manure.
Okay, so I mean, back in 1995, I was on the House Ag Committee, and I think Chuck Gipp from Northeast Iowa was the majority leader at the time, I believe.
That's right.
And I remember the debate on that, and we had a debate about how to provide how can the hog confinement operators contribute enough to an insurance fund to make sure that there is money to decommission these facilities once they get too old. And I actually had a conversation with Lloyd's of London to try to get the most the most objective and most expert advice on what kind of an insurance policy that would look like. And there was no way you could provide enough money actually it was called the indemnity fund. And so and again, lawmakers knew full well, both pro and con, the folks on Chuck Gipp's side, the folks on my side knew that there was never going to be enough money in any kind of indemnity fund to make sure you could mothball these effectively. And now we're getting to that point. Again, 1995, they were built in 96, 97. We're 15 years into it. They're retiring the buildings. They don't have enough money to close them down.
That's right.
And there's certainly not enough money in any kind of public fund they might have contributed to. So I give them an A+ for creativity on adaptive reuse. Fill them with manure. Hey, it could have been worse, Adam. They could have wanted to change them, convert them into schools or something. Rural schools,
That's right. No, that's exactly it. And that's something we fought for along the way is bonding on these types of buildings to prevent this kind of thing, or to provide a compensation when there is manure spills. Our biggest concerns with this are, when do you have manure spills? You have manure spills anytime you transport the manure. So now they're proposing to transport manure from a building that has overflowing manure pits to a closed building that's unregulated, that might have cracks in the concrete where that manure can leach into the groundwater.
Well, that's not the only time you get spills. I mean, you can get a facility, a lagoon, like a storage pit can develop a crack, a leak, or something like that. That can happen as well.
Right.
But I think what you're saying is the most sensitive period in terms of the risk of spill is when you are actually moving the stuff.
Yeah.
So they're going to be moving. Now, in some cases, the manure pits, the lagoons, are very close to the building, so it might be a fairly short distance to pump it into the building.
Right.
But here's what I'm wondering. Those buildings were not designed to store manure. In all the conversations we had about what happens to the old buildings once they are no longer usable, and think about it, 15 years, I mean, who builds a building that only lasts 15 years? I lived in a house for 19 years it's now 115 years old.
Right.
At 100, it'll be 120 soon, in fact. So, I mean, who builds a building that poorly? Well, apparently, if you're dumping the burden of cleaning it up on the taxpayers, some of these big confinement operators who move here from elsewhere do that. But the buildings aren't designed to hold manure. How can the walls withstand the pressure of all that stuff? I mean, I don't see how that works.
That's right. And if you think about it, if they're not storing any hogs in the building, if they're not raising hogs in these buildings anymore, they're using a shut down, mothballed building simply to store manure, they're not going to pay to heat that building. That means that liquid manure in the winter months is going to freeze. What happens when it freezes? It expands. That's going to crack the concrete even more.
You're a wizard at physics, aren't you?
I did take it in high school.
I didn't. I got a hard enough time getting through chemistry. Anyway, good for you. You're right. It expands. I mean, have they thought through this?
Well, that's what we see from the factory farm industry, from the likes of the Pork Producers and Farm Bureau. You said it yourself. These buildings are not designed to last hundreds of years. It's they're taking a very corporate, very factory farm approach, and that they want to spend as little as possible to maximize their outputs as quick as possible. Right. So this is one of those short-term solutions to deal with an excess in manure that factory farms are creating that's not well thought out, that will end up probably contributing to Iowa's already polluted waterways.
Folks, we're talking with Adam Mason during this segment of the Fallon Forum. Adam's with Iowa CCI, Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. If you're listening on KHOI in Ames or KPVL in Decorah, then this is a rebroadcast. But if you're listening live, you're welcome to join the conversation at 244-0077 or toll free 855-244-0077. And you can always email me at fallonforum@gmail.com. And again, the show does air live every Monday through Friday on the Fallon Forum website between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock. And if you miss the show, podcasts are available after the fact. Okay, so we have a bill that has passed the Iowa House.
Right. This bill, House File 512, passed the House of Representatives yesterday.
And again, summarizing, it would do, just in a nutshell,
create a loophole basically allowing manure storage at closed down factory farms.
Because you can't do that under current law.
No.
Okay. And so how many buildings are we talking about statewide that are closing now or will be closing soon?
So that's a very good question. The DNR has not been able to tell us this. We're concerned about it because, as we have over 8,000 factory farms in Iowa, and so as these buildings reach their maturity, more and more of them are being closed down while we see huge expansion of the industry across the state of new construction, building that next wave that's going to last 10 to 15 years.
They can't renovate the building for new hogs?
They can. What we've seen is that a lot of the corporations, whether it's Smithfield, Tyson, Cargill, they want to contract in those newer buildings that are more efficient, that have upgraded feeders and right. things like that.
Okay. So bill passed the House.
Yes.
Party line vote, or was it?
No, there was some opposition. It passed 83-16 in the House.
That's not a lot of opposition.
No, it was party line for the.
Who were the opponents? Do you know?
The opponents, the key opponent was Representative Chuck Eisenhart from the Dubuque area.
Okay, from Northeast Iowa.
Yeah, he offered an amendment basically that would have addressed some of our concerns about who is allowed to store manure in these pits. Maybe if they do close one building down, that factory farm would be able to store excess manure in it, but not take manure from other factory farms. That amendment failed. So what we're left is this giant loophole bill.
Do you happen to know how the legislative delegation from Winneshiek area and also from Story County voted?
So the delegation from Winneshiek County voted in favor of this bill. The delegation from Story County, Representatives Heddens and Wessel-Kershell, from Ames, both voted against the bill. Okay. They were no votes. However, Representative Dio, I believe, from rural Story County, voted in favor of the bill.
So it's fairly bipartisan, in your opinion, in a bad way.
Right.
So what happens when it goes to the Senate? I mean, who's the sponsor of this bill in the Senate?
Very good question. So Senator Joe Sang, a Democrat from the Quad Cities, is pushing this bill.
But now, and if I remember Senator Sang a bit, he kind of stepped off the reservation a little bit a couple years ago when he ran against Dave Loebsack in a Democratic primary for Congress.
That's correct.
Never a good idea, let me tell you.
I will say one thing about that, though. It was a surprise to us that he was still named chair of the Senate Ag Committee after challenging a sitting U.S. congressman.
That is intriguing.
Yes.
So he's introducing the bill. Does he have support? Obviously, I'm assuming that the Republicans in the Senate probably support the bill.
Yes.
And what about the Democrats in the Senate?
When this bill came out of the Senate Ag Committee, it did have unanimous support there. However, that was before we found out, or before some senators found out the true intention of this bill. It was disguised as a beginning farmer bill. We want to temporarily mothball one of these buildings to let Junior come back from college and start up the old factory farm again. But unfortunately, a pork producers lobbyist exposed the true intent, which is to create a manure loophole. And so since then, we've been hearing from more senators on the left side of the aisle that they're opposed to it. Senators like Senator Darrell Beal from North Central Iowa.
Right. And I assume Senator Cornbach might be on the opposition side of this?
Correct. Senator Cornbach, we haven't had a chance to touch base yet with Senator Mary Jo Wilhelm from Northeast Iowa.
She's from Howard County, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
But folks up there, should feel free to contact their legislators and tell them to vote no on this mothball loophole bill.
And so what about, again, leadership in the Senate is really key on deciding what comes up for a vote. You've got Mike Gronstall, obviously, with an inordinate say in this decision. And you've got Pam Yoakum from Dubuque, from Northeast Iowa. Where do they stand on the issue?
Right now, Senator Gronstall, he's told us that he doesn't like the way the bill is written in its current form, so he wants to see amendments. That's encouraging. Ultimately, we'd like to see this bill go away, and the conversations we've had with Senate President Yoakum have been encouraging in the sense that she agrees with our point of view.
Okay. Let's jump around a little bit, Adam. We're kind of all over the state here. Let's move to Tama County. I know you have been concerned about a beef packing plant in Tama County, and there's an old beef packing plant there that was heavily subsidized under a program created by the Iowa legislature that went belly up.
Right.
And now it's been resurrected. Not to store manure, in this case, to
thankfully
to serve as
not yet.
beef packing plant with additional state incentives.
Right.
I mean, are some people saying that's just throwing good money after bad, or what's the scuttlebutt on the ground on this one?
Well, from what we're hearing, and I kind of think what our position is that it's one of those things that we want to see our state economic development money used in good ways, and going to fund, throw a lot of public money at a packing plant that's already failed once seems like a huge concern. And
why did it fail the first time? What's your take on that?
Well, beef production in Iowa isn't what it used to be, and especially in central Iowa, in east central Iowa. Areas like northwest Iowa, there's still significant beef production up there, a lot of feedlots up there. But we have to make sure that and I'm sure the Republicans listening would agree with us, we have to make sure that there's a market need for a packing plant there in Tama again. Right. We're not sure that market need is there.
How do the local residents feel about it?
I think, anytime that investors come in and promise jobs to locals, it sounds like a good idea.
Do they feel burned after the first one, though?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think just the prospect of jobs still sounds good to folks, and so they're willing to get behind it. It's hard sometimes to connect those dots that it's our own taxpayer dollars being used to subsidize those.
And again, your organization, Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement, is not anti-livestock production. You just have some issues with how the industry operates at times. Exactly.
That's been one of our mottos for a long time, is that family farms, yes, factory farms, no. If you look back at the 80s, and we've talked about this before, Ed, the number of family farm jobs has been steadily decreasing since the onset of factory farms in Iowa. And the larger the feedlots are, the fewer number of family farmers you're going to have out there.
And there is a shift in that too nowadays, with more and more small farmers beginning to grow food, whether it's vegetables, fruit, beef, dairy, honey, you name it, for direct marketing to consumers through farmers markets, through community-supported agriculture, through the farm-to-school programs, through direct sale to businesses. That's happening more and more. I think that's where the real growth is likely to continue myself.
Exactly. We definitely need to see more of that. Yeah. And so, partnering, it's a number of things. It's consumers spending their dollars wisely, and local businesses that use local producers. It's also, we have to, make sure that policies aren't benefiting the fat cats, aren't benefiting corporate ag.
Right. Yeah. So again, the meat packing plant in Tama. I mean, you obviously have very strong opinions about the bill that would allow old hog confinements to be used to store manure. The meat packing plant in Tama.
Sure.
What's your verdict on that?
You know, if it pans out, I think it'll be a good thing for that area. We'd like to see more of the old butcher shops, local processing shops to handle increased demand for niche farming, for the small family farm producers like Nyman Ranch, places like that. So that's really what we want to see. Ultimately, the proof will be in the pudding. We want to make sure that these investors who are leveraging, their investment to gain even more public investment for this packing plant, we want to make sure that the jobs actually show up and that they're good paying jobs, that they're not just paying $8 an hour.
I'm a little uncomfortable using the word pudding while we're talking about hog manure.
That's a good point. I'll try and pick my words better.
And one more question back to the legislature.
Yes.
Again, you mentioned earlier too, there was a controversy a few years back regarding the ability of confinement owners to be able to spread manure on frozen ground. The concern is that you spread it on frozen ground, it runs off quite easily into the watershed. So now, does this bill, or is there some kind of companion bill that addresses that issue in some way?
Well, what we found out is that legislation was so successful in preventing factory farms from spreading manure on top of frozen ground that now they're kind of exposed for their bad management practices. They're not doing a good enough job in spreading their liquid manure from these factory farms during the appropriate times in the fall or late spring. And so it's creating an excess of manure that they can't handle because, frankly, they're not good managers.
Yeah. All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, if folks want to reach you, if they want to fight with you and tell you what a horrible person you are and how bad you are for agriculture in Iowa, or if they want to heap praises upon you, or if they want to tease you for your analogy of manure to
proof
pudding.
of the pudding, yes.
How do they contact you, Adam?
You can get a hold of us at www.iowacci.org, or our phone number is 515-282-0484.
Okay, great. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, we are going to talk a little bit about the work of the Southern Poverty Law Center and a recent article by Mark Potok about the rise of patriot groups, so-called patriot groups that have a very anti-government agenda in mind. I'm going to just start by telling you a little bit about the article that caught my attention. Again, Mark is with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and he reminds us that about 20 years ago, after the passage of the Brady gun control bill, a whole wave of again Patriot movement type things occurred. Groups that came up with a very distinct anti-government flavor. He describes them as a, quote, combustible mix of gun-toting militias and baseless conspiracy theories about government perfidy that culminated in 1995 with the mass murder of 168 people in an Oklahoma City federal building. And again, I know that there are folks who probably don't see that as a connection, but I think it's a point worth discussing. And I think we've got Mark on the phone here with us. Mark, welcome to the Fallon Forum.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we are calling you from where are you at?
I'm in Montgomery, Alabama.
Montgomery, Alabama. Welcome to the program. Thanks for taking the time to join us. And again,
my pleasure.
Your article, your opinion piece, generated some conversation here locally, including a few letters that think you were off the wall. And and let me know. I mean, where would you like to start? There's so much to get into here.
I think I remember the piece. This was definitely looking at the overall rise in these groups and what's behind that rise. Correct?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, the concern is that again, the response to legislation that is being proposed after the Sandy Hook massacre is again fueling this fire of basically anti-American groups. I mean, they clothe themselves in this mantle of patriotism, but they really are anti-government. And some people say, well, that makes them essentially anti-American.
Well, I'm not sure it makes them anti-American. I mean, we were a nation conceived in, opposition to King George and all of that. I mean, look, somebody sent me one or two of the sort of letters, criticizing me in the Iowa paper and so on. And, basically they're saying, well, what I'm doing or what Southern Poverty Law Center does is sort of call people who are real patriots and defend the Constitution and so on bad names. And I think that's not true. Our criticism of these groups, and, specifically what I mentioned in that article, the massive rise in these groups has not been in quote-unquote hate groups, but in the militia groups, in the so-called Patriot groups. That's what they call themselves. Our criticism is not that someone wants to defend the Constitution or, take an oath to defend the country against, all the enemies, foreign and domestic, or that sort of thing. Our criticism is that this is a movement, and these are groups which are all wrapped up in conspiracy theories that are completely false and name a set of false enemies.
But a lot of those theories have gained a lot of popularity. There are a lot of people who follow them, who believe in them, who think that the UN is going to take over the U.S. government and it's going to just turn this into some kind of a Soviet state.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There are a lot of people that believe it, and that's why, when I write a story like that, I frequently am attacked in this way. But, of course, it's not true that the federal government has a secret plan to impose martial law in the United States. It's not true that the federal government has a secret plan to take all Americans' guns away and throw anyone who resists into concentration camps that have been secretly built by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's not true that the federal government is secretly planning to force the United States into a socialistic one world government, the so-called New World Order.
And you can say that, and anyone can say that until the cows come home, and yet there will be those folks who are still absolutely convinced that that agenda is there, that this is already happening.
And in some ways, who cares, right? I mean, if people believe silly things, if they believe, the moon landing was staged in the Houston TV studio, does it really matter?
Well, it does matter when it's a big bunch of people, though.
Well, that's my argument would be it matters because ultimately beliefs like this, baseless conspiracy theories and so on, result oftentimes in real criminal violence. I mean, Oklahoma City is the classic example of that. 168 men, women, and children had to die because Tim McVeigh believed a lot of this stuff. It was, utterly false. And yet it has animated a huge amount of criminal violence and terrorism. And let me say, I do not mean to suggest, nor do we collectively, by listing these groups, by writing a lot about them, that all people involved in this movement or members of these groups are Tim McVeighs. That's clearly not true. The vast majority of people in the so-called Patriot movement will never shoot a police officer, will never blow up a federal building, will never commit a major crime. But the reality is that if you look at the militia movement, both in the 1990s and then as it's come back in the last 3 or 4 years, it has produced an enormous level of violence, or at least attempted violence.
And do you think
it wasn't only McVeigh? There are an enormous number of these plots.
Now, do you think some of it has to do with stressful economic conditions when people are finding they're working harder, making less money, at risk of bankruptcy,
yes. I mean,
medical issues, lots of things?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is absolutely yes. I think that probably the single biggest driver in the growth of these groups has been the election of Barack Obama, our first black president, of course, and what that represents, the changing look of the country, the changing demographics, the loss of a white majority that's been predicted for 2043. And, it's not rank, Klan-like racism. It's more like this country looks less and less like the country I grew up in, a general feeling of discomfort that's tied to other major social changes. But the second big driver is just what you say, is the economy, which really collapsed at the very same time in the fall of 2008 that Barack Obama first appeared on the national political scene.
So it became easy to blame people.
I'm sorry?
It became easy to blame people who are different. The conditions economically are getting worse. The country is getting more diverse. Maybe there's a connection between those two. That's how some people see it.
I mean, I think that, there are huge cultural changes afoot, same-sex marriage, interracial relationships, all kinds of things. And, what it all amounts to, it seems to me, is a feeling for many people that the ground is shifting underneath their feet, that this is not the world they grew up in, that there's not a comfortable place for them. And, of course, the economy kind of puts that all on steroids in the sense that you don't know if you have a job next week. You're afraid your kid's getting out of school, perhaps. Is that boy or girl going to be able to get work themselves? Might your business fail? All those kinds of things. So, it's a feeling of real insecurity. I think we're at a kind of a historic moment in terms of the major changes that are happening and have been happening over the last 10 or 15 years in this society.
So folks on the political left frequently malign the anti-government conspiracy theory Patriot group types as being Neanderthals, as being just a bunch of violent redneck types. They don't. I think I hear what you're saying is a more is not a conciliatory perspective, but a more let's try to understand where they're coming from. And I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think it's really important. I think a big mistake in analyzing the extreme right in this country and other places as well is to simply regard people who have that set of beliefs or some variation of those sets of beliefs as lunatics, as mentally ill. The reality is sure, the extreme right, like other kind of sectors in our society, has more than its share of mentally ill people. But at the end of the day, most of the people in that world are reacting to real things in the real world. It's not a pure fantasy. The conspiracy theories are. I mean, FEMA doesn't have secret concentration camps. Mexico doesn't have a secret plan to conquer the Southwest. The UN doesn't have a secret plan to destroy property rights through the Agenda 21 sustainability plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But is the world really changing in very, really quite dramatic ways that affect us in our lives every day? Yeah, I think clearly so.
Yeah, we actually have legislation introduced at the Iowa State House this year by a conservative Republican lawmaker to basically do away with the state's smart growth planning principles. And that was something that I worked on when I was a state representative. It would do away with those planning principles under the premise that this is kind of the sneaky UN nose under the camel's tent, basically getting Agenda 21 into Iowa law through smart growth and intelligent planning.
Right. And as you know, having worked on it, it is a ridiculous idea because the fact is Agenda 21 forces no one to do anything.
Right. It's all voluntary.
It's not a legal treaty. There are no legal obligations. Not one person in the United States is obliged to do one thing as a result of Agenda 21. And yet, not to single out a particular party, and yet, in January of 2012, the Republican National Committee adopted as a platform statement opposition to Agenda 21, which it described as an insidious plan, quote unquote, to impose socialism or Marxism on the United States and take away our property rights.
Yeah. So how
that
do
kind
we?
of thing is not helpful to any kind of small d democratic discussion of issues that face us.
So again, the movement appears still to be strengthening. There are over 1,300 so-called Patriot groups in the nation, in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, and the growth has been just astounding. I mean, it began in 2008. We had 149 of those groups. So that amounts to some, if I recall, about 813% growth in 3 years.
So that's a matter of concern.
Yes, it is a concern. And let me say that you mentioned, I think you were reading a couple of lines from the editorial I wrote about all this, and where I'm talking about gun control, I'm not sure how clearly I made the point in the piece, but what I'm really saying is that this enormous growth predates anything about gun control. In other words, we finished our count for last year at the end of December. The Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre, the Newtown massacre, of course, was on December 14th. So the numbers we are reporting don't reflect in any sense the reaction to the discussion of gun control. And what I would say about that is, since gun control became a serious discussion in January and February, we've seen an enormously furious pushback against that. To the point, so what I'm saying is that I think with very little doubt, the gun control debate, and if anything really comes out of it, are very much pouring fuel on this fire, are likely to push these groups ahead once again.
And yet 90% of Americans support mandatory background checks.
Yeah. I think that, it's been an interesting thing to watch the gun control debate take shape again. And gun control debate we really haven't seen in this country since some 20 years ago, since the early 90s. I think that's right. Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes of this. I appreciate the work that the Southern Poverty Law Center does. I've visited with some of your representatives here in Des Moines in the past, and I think your contribution to the discussion on this issue is very important. Again, keep those cards and letters coming. I'm sure we'd like to read more of your work here in the Des Moines Register, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Quad City Times, across the state of Iowa.
Well, a real pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, Mark. Thank you so much. Mark Potok, folks, with the Southern Poverty Law Center. When we come back from a short break here, folks, we're going to talk with Jerry Karnas with the Center on Biological Diversity. We're going to talk about the oil spill in Arkansas. This just happened. Some estimates are over 400,000 gallons of oil spilled from what is essentially the Keystone Pipeline. And this might throw the whole decision-making process of the Obama administration into a bit of a quandary as to what to do when it comes time to make the decision on whether to approve the pipeline. We're going to talk with Jerry when we come back from a short break here on the Fallon Forum. I do want to take a second to thank Iowa chapter of Sierra Club, folks, for sponsoring this show. Also, Physicians for Social Responsibility, the Iowa chapter of that excellent organization. And I want to thank Gateway Marketing Cafe for sponsoring the program as well, this segment of the show. Gateway is at 20th and Woodland. And again, a fantastic cafe for breakfast, lunch, and supper. And on Mondays, you can get a really great deal on supper there. It's a phenomenal bargain in terms of what you get for the price you pay. And again, there's the grocery store as well, where I spent a good bit of money yesterday trying to figure out what I could buy to go with this, literally, I'm not kidding you, 16-inch long parsnip that I dug up out of my garden. Go to my Facebook page, folks, and check out this parsnip. But I tell you, the fresh vegetables I got from Gateway Market supplemented that parsnip wonderfully. So do support them, folks. They're a great local business in our community. They're also a great supporter of this program. That's Gateway Marketing Cafe at 20th and Woodland. I'll be back in just a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
The dawn of a new era begins.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of WebcastOneLive.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates in just a minute. There's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast 1 Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast 1 Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going, man.
Community CPA is the 15th largest CPA firm in Iowa, providing audit, tax, and accounting services. Community CPA specializes in international tax treaty and double taxation avoidance among countries and states. 9 dedicated, experienced, hardworking staff are the company's foundation, and their compassion towards every client is the secret behind Community CPA's success. At Community CPA, you can expect quality service year-round. Call 288-3188. Community CPA, 3816 Ingersoll. Experience the difference.
This is Dr. Holding, the Story County Veterinary Clinic. For 15 years, we have been spaying and neutering feral cat groups at affordable prices. Wild cats destroy game birds and songbirds. A single female cat can produce over 4,000 kittens in 7 years. The shelters are full, so unwanted kittens will be put to sleep. Your cats will stay home and stay healthy. Call us for all your dog and cat needs at the Story County Veterinary Clinic between Ames and Nevada on Highway 30, 1 mile east of Interstate 35. 515-232-8766.
Wow, some wedding.
Yeah, I've never seen a bride in coveralls.
Right, and skipping down the aisle to accordion music.
Not to mention the reception. That wedding cake was a freaking fruit cake.
It's your wedding. Don't leave anything to chance. Diana's Wedding Cakes. Using only the finest, freshest ingredients with free on-time delivery and setup. Choose one of Diana's custom designs or create your own. Call Diana's Wedding Cakes, 641-275-9279. That's 641-275-9279.
Local farms, global flavor. That's the secret to Hawk's growing popularity. The best meals begin with the best ingredients, and 90% of Hawk's ingredients come from local farms. In addition to seasonal fruits and vegetables, Hawk features grass-fed beef and lamb, and pasture-raised chicken and duck, all raised without hormones, steroids, or cages. The coffee is fair trade, locally roasted, and Hawk's House liquors come from right here in Iowa. Hawk's owners go the extra mile, composting organic waste and recycling. For more information or to make reservations, visit hawktable.com. That's HOQ table.com.
It's time to think about upgrading the efficiency of your furnace and air conditioner. Leonard Tinker Heating and Cooling has provided honest, competent service for over 20 years. Whether it's your home or business, for repair work or to install a more energy-efficient furnace or air conditioner, call Leonard Tinker at 263-0422. That's 263-0422. For honest, competent heating and cooling service, call Leonard Tinker at 263-0422.
I love driving to Newton to see the races.
Me too, but I only have to drive across town.
You live in Newton?
Yep, Newton's got small town charm and it's close to Des Moines. I love the safe, friendly neighborhoods and family-owned businesses. And Newton's wind energy industry is really taking off.
How'd you find your home?
Dan Kelly with First Choice Realty. And Dan helped me find my office too.
Next time, instead of just speeding by, I'll stop in and check out Newton.
Why don't you check out Newton? Call Dan Kelly at 641-521-9260 or Dan Kelly at mchsi.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
I'm not the guy who cared about love. I'm not the guy who cared about fortunes and such. Never cared much. Oh, look at
Max Wellman, folks, and we are back to the conversation here on the Fallon Forum. Thanks for sticking around for our third and final and perhaps most critical segment of this show. We are talking about the oil spill in Arkansas, and we'll broaden the conversation a little bit beyond that, but that is in the news. It's a big deal. It could have a huge impact on what happens with the decision regarding the Keystone Pipeline. I'm delighted to have Jerry Karnas joining us. He is with the Center for Biological Diversity. Jerry, welcome to the program.
Hello, Ed. Hello,
Hey.
Hello, Iowa.
Yeah, well, and where are we calling you from?
I'm actually in sunny Miami right now. It's a brisk 84 degrees, so it's a perfect time for folks from Iowa to visit.
Well, all right, yeah, although I'm kind of enjoying our weather here at last after the worst March in living memory for a lot of us. It's actually starting to look a little bit like spring. But 84 sounds good, too. All right. So, hey, well, just to catch people up on this, because I think a lot of folks weren't even aware that this happened, but it was on Friday that the spill in Arkansas happened. What can you tell us about it?
Well, details are still kind of trickling out, but it seems that a pipeline carrying heavy Wabasa crude, which is basically the same, it's basically Canadian tar sands oil, the same type of oil that would be moved through the Keystone Pipeline, ruptured in a small Arkansas town called Mayflower in a pretty new residential development, only about 6 years old. And it's very close, within a couple miles of one of the largest man-made freshwater lakes in the country, major, bass fishing and recreation lake. And it's right now it looks like it could be a spill, up to 420,000 gallons of heavy Wabasa tar sands crude.
Okay, so this
spilled into that community.
So this is a pipeline. It's not the Keystone Pipeline. I know there's a southern extension being worked on. Would this feed into the Keystone Pipeline, or what's its relation to that?
No, this pipeline goes from Illinois to the Texas Gulf Coast. I mean, it does the same type of movement as the Keystone would do, taking oil north from Canada down to the Texas Gulf Coast refineries. It's just through a different route.
So where does the oil come from?
It comes from it comes to the United States through Illinois, but there's another pipeline that gets it from Canada to Illinois.
Okay, so is it also from the tar sands in Alberta?
Yes. It's called heavy Wabasca crude, which is basically the same thing as Canadian Alberta tar sands oil.
Okay, so I'm curious that this thought is just coming to mind. I did not realize it was already pumping oil from the same area. And again, the same type of oil, the same heavy, dense, difficult to extract crude, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, these types of events in the lead up to this Keystone decision are becoming increasingly common. The company that wants to build Keystone actually does have a pipeline called Keystone 1 already in production. That pipeline has only been in existence for 3 years, and in its 3 short years of existence, it has already leaked 14 times, including a 22,000-gallon spill in one of the Dakotas. The Enbridge, which is another company that moves tar sands oil, they had an absolutely devastating event happen in the Kalamazoo River, also in 2011, spilling hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil into the Kalamazoo River. That event really showed us how difficult it is to clean this stuff up. It sunk right to the bottom because it's so heavy, and it has not been cleaned up yet. They don't.
So
know
it's sitting in the bottom of the lake.
In the Kalamazoo River.
The river, rather. Yeah, it's just sitting there.
People were evacuated, because of that event as well. And then another event in 2011, an Exxon managed pipeline. That one ruptured in the Yellowstone River, spilling 21,000 gallons into the Yellowstone River, an iconic, Western river, trout fishing river.
Right.
And just last week, Exxon received a $1.7 million fine.
Right, I saw that.
For that spill. And so there's a kind of there's a very clear pattern emerging here that these folks that want to, that are operating these current pipelines and who want to build even more pipelines, really have a pretty bad track record when it comes to safety. I mean, they don't really seem to know what they're doing.
So, I mean, again, 420,000 gallons, that's the height of what might be discovered once the leak is entirely assessed. That's what we're looking at spilling in Arkansas this past week. And I assume that spill might even be continuing now if they plugged it up.
I believe that it's been I believe that they stopped the flow of oil, so it has been plugged up. But we still don't know the actual extent.
Okay.
Of the spill. Exxon seems to think that it's the high end is 420,000 gallons, which is about 12,000 to 13,000 barrels of oil.
And would that make it the single biggest pipeline spill in our history?
No, the biggest inland pipeline spill in the history of the country was the Kalamazoo River.
Okay, that was. Yeah.
That was big.
Oh, you said that's right, 500,000. Yeah. So, well, it's a matter of concern, and okay. Now let me ask you this. Obviously, the biggest concern driving opposition to the Keystone Pipeline is the amount of carbon both the extraction and the eventual burning of that fuel would release into the atmosphere, and the impact that would have on climate change, on increasing the number of parts per million of carbon concentrated in the atmosphere. The other more local issue, which is also important, is the effect on communities, on biodiversity, on actual houses, neighborhoods, communities. Let me really quick here show a brief video filmed by somebody living in that subdivision, that 6-year-old subdivision you described in Mayflower. Let's roll that clip if we could, Maddie.
So that is a pipeline that is busted and is flooded the neighborhood and is going all the way to the drain at the end of the street. Luckily, our house is here, which is seemingly unaffected, but the smell is unbelievable. I mean, look.
Yeah, well, it's
incredible, and that is oil.
It's a fairly low-quality home video, but it sure gets the point across. I mean, you see this vast plume just flowing slowly down down along the side of the street into people's homes. I don't know what that takes to clean up. I don't know whether insurance covers that. But to the specific point of the work that you do, Jerry, biodiversity. How do these local issues? How do these local spills affect the aquatic and land-based life in areas where they happen?
Well, they're absolutely devastating. Whether it's the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, where we're still seeing, the cascading effects from that spill, or whether it be, what's going on in inland areas, in our rivers and streams. These things are a real serious threat, and it's not just critters and fish and wildlife that are bearing all this risk. It is actual. It's people's communities. It's their homes, right. It's their neighborhoods, it's their own businesses and jobs. I lived in Florida all through the BP spill. I mean, that was much more than an environmental disaster. It was a social and economic disaster for thousands of miles of coastline. That where people still haven't recovered, and so it's a huge. I mean, I think what this spill does is it really makes it very, very clear that look, Exxon made $45 billion in profit last year. They paid a $1.7 million fine for their egregious action on the Yellowstone River. Who knows what they're going to pay, for this particular event? But what we're basically being asked to do is we're being asked to shoulder all the communities across the country 100% of the risk. The oil companies keep 100% of the profits, and the lion's share of the oil gets used up on the world market and doesn't even reduce gas prices at all, because 2 months ago, OPEC decided to reduce production. And so, we're drilling for more oil than we have ever drilled. There's a North American oil boom going on. If there was ever a time that the talking point, from the energy, and big oil boosters would come true, that if we produce more, we'll drive down gas prices. If that talking point was ever going to come true, it would be coming true today.
Right.
But it's not. We're paying higher gas prices at the pump today than we ever have before.
Well,
we have no power to control the price of oil. So we're basically being asked to shoulder all this risk. We get no profit from it, and we don't even see any reduction in gas prices.
Yeah.
And that is not even getting into the climate, issues revolving around this highly, toxic form of oil. So that's just the basic, kind of economic issues that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and again, President Barack Obama made the case. One of his bragging points during the speech after his most recent election was, "We are now producing more oil in this country than we ever have." I mean, that was a talking point that he was putting out there as an accomplishment. Again, the reason being, now we are less dependent on foreign oil because we're producing more of our own. And clearly that's not a talking point that you would feel proud to display.
Well, look, I'm an American. I think it's great to keep, American dollars here at home in America, but that's not really what's happening here. These oil companies are multi-billion-dollar international global, companies. And so, just because more is being produced here doesn't mean that we're really investing in our economy the same way that if a solar panel is manufactured here in the United States, put on a home in the United States, you allow that homeowner to make a little profit off that solar panel. All that money stays right here at home. Or like Iowa. People have big disagreements about ethanol, but at least the chain of custody, the economic chain of ethanol, is here within the United States.
Right.
It has some environmental issues, about it, that people can, can debate, but at least that supply chain, is here in the United States. A windmill in Iowa, that supply chain, the steel is from Pennsylvania or from the Northwest. All the nuts and bolts are manufactured all across this country. 15,000 parts in some of these windmills, and then they're on a farm in Iowa producing money and creating jobs, in Iowa. So it's a much different model.
Yeah, that's a very good example, because we have now almost 30% of our energy production, of our electrical production, comes from wind, and we have about 7,000 jobs relevant to the wind energy industry here in Iowa, which is a lot. Let me ask you a specific question relevant to the Keystone Pipeline. Again, that is, all eyes are kind of on Washington for a couple reasons right now: sequester, Supreme Court rulings, and Keystone Pipeline. People are very interested in knowing what Barack Obama is going to do relevant to authorizing the Keystone Pipeline. How do you think this most recent spill in Arkansas affects that decision?
Well, I think it puts the president and the State Department in a really tough spot. Just a week and a half prior to these spills, and let's remember, the Arkansas spill wasn't the only spill last week.
Right.
In Minnesota, there was also a spill from a train, moving this tar sands crude oil. So whether it's a plane, a train, or an automobile, or a pipeline, or an offshore drilling rig, these guys don't seem to be able to get it right. And so we have a State Department just issued their environmental impact statement, about the Keystone Pipeline, and they came to the absurd conclusion, dual conclusions actually, that on the one hand, they expect the Keystone Pipeline over its lifetime to spill over 100 times.
Wow.
And yet they also concluded in the same document that it's not likely to generate adverse environmental impact.
And again, to make clear, this isn't American oil. This is not even oil that Americans are going to be using for the most part. It's Canadian oil piped through our country and then processed and then exported into the global market.
No, it is one of the rawest deals you can ever imagine. Number one, so basically all we are being used as is a throughway to be able to get this market into the global market, to really get this oil into the hands of the Chinese.
Yeah.
Right? That's really what's driving this.
Yeah.
But then also, we're also using eminent domain
Right.
to force landowners.
That's been a huge issue.
To provide this, ingress and egress, while at the same time, this stuff is just junk energy. It's not even good energy. To be able to, so for instance, when you want to produce a barrel of oil, out of an offshore, platform in the Gulf of Mexico, or, a rig in Saudi Arabia, or a rig in Texas, it basically, you get, for every 1 unit of energy you put, into the process to produce that oil, you get 15 units of energy back. So it's a 1 to 15 ratio.
Mm.
This tar sands oil is so energy intensive, the process to create it, that it's a 1 to 6 or a 1 to 5 ratio. So for every unit you put in, you only get 5 or 6 back. Whereas regular oil is, is 1 to 15. And so that's why it's so much more harmful, to the, to climate, because you're burning so much more fuel to get at much less, to get at a much less available amount of fuel.
Now, it often takes a serious and major occurrence for Washington to take action on an issue. Again, look at the immigration issue. Republicans are taking action on immigration because they realize they got their clock cleaned in the last election because of their inability to appeal to that element of the electorate. You have the president and the vice president and other key leaders, mostly Democrats, who are taking a stand on the gun issue because of Sandy Hook. And you have more conversation, I think, about climate change because of Hurricane Sandy. And so I guess, the timing of this, well, again, it's horrible what happened. The timing might be fortuitous in its impact on the president's decision on Keystone. It seems like, it's hard to know. It really is hard to know. The indications from the State Department are, I think, that they're inclined to approve the pipeline, but this could throw a wrench into that plan. This could, it's big enough, it's current enough, it's disturbing enough where if the president is on the verge of making a decision, this could push him the other direction. Do you think I'm overstating the case?
Well, I think you would make a fantastic advisor to President Obama. I think that's the way I think that's the way we hope our politics can work. But I can tell you that I don't want to say that believe that I'm cynical, but I did live through and had to work through in Florida the BP disaster.
Right.
And a month before the BP disaster happened, the Florida legislature almost passed a groundbreaking law to allow drilling within 3 miles of Florida's beaches. Right now, it's completely, within state waters. Right. Something that was absolutely unheard of, in the 1980s, 90s, and earlier part of this decade. Absolute third rail of politics.
Right.
The BP, they told us this is safe. This is, they told us all these things, right? BP happened. Nobody lost their job. Nobody paid a political price for that fiasco. Yeah. And so, I think that that's how politics ought to work. This is a teachable moment. It does, add a lot of credibility to the environmental movement's claims that these. Look, the basic issue is, oil is a defective product. It's like tobacco. It's a product that does not work. It's making us sick, right? And so it has to. That's what we have to do. We have to treat this product as if it's defective.
Right.
It's like a Pinto. It needs to be taken off the road. It's destroying the planet. And so I think what's more important about the Keystone, effort, is that it's building a movement that is built to last.
Right.
That is built to confront not just this pipeline, but the entire fossil fuel system.
And that's where this March for Climate Action next year is going to hopefully come handy. It's as I've told you, it's a march of 1,000 people across the country, and just today announcing that it would for sure be routing through Nebraska. Now, hopefully, as it crosses the proposed line of the Keystone Pipeline, we'll be able to say, hey, praise to President Barack Obama for saying no to foreign oil, Canadian oil in this case, to not building the Keystone Pipeline. There's a possibility, of course, though, that pipeline might be built, and then, of course, I think the praise will be replaced by protest. But I think, hopefully, among all the other things that are happening, this march will help raise public awareness about the risks of climate change and one of the many reasons we need to get beyond our addiction to fossil fuel.
No, I mean, I can't congratulate you enough, Ed, on this fantastic idea, and I hope the center can play a really fruitful role in you making this a success. But I mean, what you're doing is exactly what's necessary to do.
Yeah.
This movement is quickly and rapidly transitioning into a civil rights style movement.
Yeah.
This is what we failed to do in the past few years when we almost passed the climate bill at the United States Senate is we failed to make this
right
civil rights.
Good point.
We were obsessed with clean energy jobs and basically talking about anything but the health of the planet and impacts and what this will mean for future generations and our children. So now we're not. We are confronting this thing head on.
Right.
And there's a movement building. This march is yet another fantastic example of this. That there is a generation of people out there that are ready to confront this system that's making the planet sick.
Well, Jerry, I've got to wrap up the show.
No problem.
And thank you for your great work at the Center for Biological Diversity, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Ed.
All right.
I look forward to keeping in touch.
All right. Thank you so much, Jerry. And folks, thank you for tuning into the Fallon Forum today. Again, if you're listening on KHOI in Story County or KPVL in Decorah, this is a rebroadcast. You can hear the Fallon Forum live every day online at www.fallonforum.com from 12 noon to 1 o'clock on Monday through Friday. Thanks again. I'll be back tomorrow. I do want to thank Community CPA and Associates for sponsoring this segment of our show. Community CPA and Associates is at 3816 Ingersoll Ave. If you need help with your taxes or accounting, they are the go-to place. Yingsa has built Community CPA into the 10th largest accounting firm in the state. You don't do that because you're not good. You do that because you're really good and you serve your customers well. So give her a shout at 288-3188. That's Community CPA, 288-3188. Thank you, Maddie Arrington, my producer. Thank you, Webcast One Live, for providing the studio. We'll be back tomorrow, folks, on the Fallon Forum.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershot.
I'm administrative manager.
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
If we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home.
It's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.